All right, so we're here in lovely Burlington, Vermont, with Steve Shepard and Ann Hanley, who is she's down south in Boston. Ann, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. It's 1 degree here, so much warmer than it is there.
That's right. Today, Steve, what are the numbers for today?
I believe right now outside, in spite of the sun shining out that window, it's 9 below zero.
9 below zero.
We're going to the beach later.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that. Why are we shooting in Burlington? That's my question.
Because we can, Tim. I can't think of a better reason than that.
It's cheaper.
It is cheaper.
Actually, we're here. We're doing an interview with the good Reverend Dr. Steve Shepard, Esquire, on a series about mobility and connecting the unconnected. And so part of that is coming out here in Burlington, where there are some, not Burlington, but just outside of it, some very rural areas, and just some of the challenges of how you bring the network to people who are way out here. So that's why we're here, I guess, basically. That's not really a story, Ann.
That's not a very good story at all. But it was, it was a nice setup, I guess, to a story. It was the backstory to the story. So, Steve, before I realized that you'd written a book actually about storytelling and teaching executives how to tell compelling stories. I was looking at a few of your videos on that I guess Tim had sent me, and I was really struck by the fact that, wow, this guy can tell a story. So it actually makes a lot of sense that you wrote that book. But I'm curious about one thing. If you could talk a little bit about, do you think that, I guess, have you always been a storyteller? Do you think that storytelling is innate, or is it something that, that you've learned?
I think the answer is this. Different people learn in different ways, and I learn through stories. One of the ways that I internalize information and put information into context is by telling stories and by hearing stories. So because of what I do for a living, which is basically to be sort of an industry analyst and an observer of what's going on in the telecom and the media and the IT worlds, I've learned that if you can take what is usually, frankly, kind of boring and innately not particularly relevant information and package it within a story that makes it human, then you can make that information have impact. So I've sort of developed, I guess, as a storyteller over the years, and it's that storytelling skill that's kind of come out almost as a lead in everything that I do. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, but I will tell you this, it's very, very important, and the more I do it, the more, in my mind, the more impactful it becomes, just because people respond to good stories.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I guess the question is, can you teach storytelling? How do you teach storytelling?
The way you teach storytelling is by watching storytellers. And some of the great storytellers out there, of course, are movie makers. So for example, you look at any great movie, you'll find that every good movie has the same critical elements that any good story has. They always have some sort of an opening gambit, which is sort of the challenge. It's the thing we're going to address during the making of this film or during the progress of the book that you're reading. They always take the reader or the viewer on what I call a wild ride, which is this sort of the ups and downs of the story as you're going through the process. And the thing about a good storyteller is that the storyteller is always along for the ride. They don't sort of put you on the roller coaster and say, have fun, I'll see you at the end. They're sitting next to you. And that's always a really important element. And then the third part of a good story is there's always closure. There's always sort of a final challenge or a moment where the person walks away and says, I now know what I can do differently or what I have to do differently. It's the call to action. And so when you look at really great stories, you find that they all have those elements, but they also always have some kind of a hero. And to me, this is the really important part. We could look at movies. In fact, I teach a workshop on storytelling, and one of the things I have the participants do is I have them come to the workshop with two things. Number one, their favorite children's story, which always creates some raised eyebrows, but there's a sort of a method to my madness. And I always have them come in with their favorite movie hero. And the reason I have them bring their favorite children's story is because these are adults, and even as adults, that story is still important to them. Most of them still have the book. And I want them to tell me why that story is important to them, because there's usually something about it that energized them or was magnetic to them or that caused them to become the kind of people that they were. And I realize that's a strong statement, but I'm serious about that. The movie hero or their favorite hero in television or film is usually a person who, for example, is sort of a normal person. It's what people in Hollywood call the everyman. It's Indiana Jones, a mild-mannered college professor who gets into these incredible sort of adventures and manages to come out on top. It's Chief Brody in Jaws who says you're going to need a bigger boat, and in fact he does, and yet he still always comes out on top. It's a person that people identify with, but here's the key. It doesn't have to be a person. In much of the work that I do, technology is the hero. We bring technology to a place that's never had it before, and magic happens. Schools get better, healthcare gets better, education gets better, government gets more transparent, and so on. So yes, you can teach storytelling, you just have to sort of incorporate all of these various elements.
So, but look, if these ideas have been out there for a while. Why do you think there's such a difficulty for the corporate world, right? Who have a bright communications team and marketing team. It's a challenge. We don't see more of this coming from the corporate world.
I work with a lot of executives to help them change the way they communicate, to give them more skills in being more human in the way they tell stories. And what I often find is that there's a fear there. There's a fear there because as these people take on positions of authority and positions of power in corporations, what ends up happening is they kind of forget that it's okay to just be a human. It's okay to appeal to that basic fundamental thing that makes people be people.
Right.
Stories tie us together, they bring us together. And when I see corporations that have embraced this, when corporations figure out that storytelling is an important part of how they represent themselves to the markets they serve, magic happens. Because what they're really doing is they're creating a link between what they do and what the customer needs, but they're doing it in a very human way, and that often doesn't happen. And so the more we can get people to understand that and to use these kinds of tools, the better off they're going to be, because people tend to resonate with that which makes them comfortable and that which makes them sort of appeals to their basic, sort of humanity, if you'll allow me to use that word.
Okay.
That's awesome. I just have one final question before I have to dash here.
Yes. Is this about your pipe?
It's not about my frozen pipes. Although I have been monitoring that situation while you've been talking, Steve, just so you know.
How is it? Yeah,
so, no,
keep us posted on that.
Are you talking about
solid,
broadband here?
solid.
Or
No, my question for you is what's your book from your childhood? What's your seminal book?
I have two. The first one is The Elephant's Child by Kipling. It's part of the Just So Stories collection, and it's really how the elephant got his trunk. It's a book about being a hero. It's a book about being different. It's a book about being challenged. The other one is really a collection of stories, and it's Winnie the Pooh. It's the entire Winnie the Pooh collection. And I think the reason I like it so much is because it's about unfettered adventure. It's about being willing to kind of get out on the edge. It's about being willing to stick your head in the honey jar even though there may be a downside at the other end. So those are my two, and I actually use them fairly often when I teach the workshops, and just about everybody's read them. And even if they haven't, they get them very quickly. So, it's sort of a fun thing. It's a good exercise to do. I'd be curious to know what yours is, Annie.
Yeah, what's yours, Annie?
All right, well, one of them would be, I think, Are You My Mother?
Uh-huh.
Which is basically a book about trying to find your place in the world, right? Going up and putting yourself in various situations. And I've done that a lot where I've thought that, a crane was my mother. In fact, finding your place in the world, finding out, where you connect, where you belong.
Absolutely. What about you, Tim? What's yours?
Mine is David and Goliath. And that's because my dad used to tell me that story every night. And I'd always ask for that story. And he's a Presbyterian minister, so he always had some kind of pro-Christian agenda. So he'd always fit that in there somehow, regardless of if I wanted something different. But that just, and it's really more about the emotion of having that moment with my dad, of just him, telling me that story. And so I asked him, it's funny, I asked him the last time we were in Texas to tell that story to my kids. And and my mom made these little puppets out of bags, out of the sandwich bags and stuff of David and Goliath, although they weren't to scale. I just realized that. They should have done like this. It was I remember my kids were mesmerized. They're 5 and 9, and my dad was telling this story, and they were just locked in like I've never seen them. It was amazing. And it's funny. I thought this is an Instagram moment, and I thought about grabbing, and then I finally realized, no, just stay here. It was one of the first times that I said, I'm just going to stay here and enjoy this, you know, and not take a picture.
Yeah.
But that's a memory I'll just keep, and it's not on my iPhone, unfortunately.
Love it.
So.
That's
Love
great.
it.
All right, Annie, we'll let you go back and work on your pipe, and then we're going to go out in we're in ice station zebra conditions here right now.
Exactly.
And
if somebody could send a warm probe of some kind, I'd appreciate it.
yeah, we're going to have to edit that in post, by the way. I don't think we can get that through the censors.
All right. Well, enjoy, guys.
Okay,
Thank
talk
you.
to you later.
Take care.
All right, bye.
All right. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.